Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining me again. It's always really nice to have live listeners. It makes me perform that much better. My name's Becky, as most of you would know, and I deal with DISC. I'm a master trainer, so I love doing these webinars and passing on information to people or new information to people. So today's webinar is about conflict, and especially handling conflict in the workplace. So in the next 30 minutes, I plan to show you how useful the DISC tool is to understand how our individual styles can be sometimes misunderstood, and that can quickly lead to conflict. I plan to show you how each style has issues it strives for, and how each style has issues it really likes to avoid. If it can't avoid some issues, conflict can quickly be generated. You know, we all know sometimes it's easier to get along with some people and sometimes it's a bit more difficult with others. Sometimes the rough patch is just temporary and other times it's the, difficulty seems to last a lot longer. During those more difficult times, it's often in it's basically our communication that the first signs of tension can show. Misunderstandings occur, we can try to second guess what the other party is really meaning, and frequently our own words can be misread, or what was normally discussed boils up several notches and erupts into friction or angst. So how can we actually avoid this conflict, especially in the workplace? So, starting with yourself is a very good place to start. The more you know about you and your own style, the more you can effectively see where conflict might grow. So if you can, 1, can identify and accept your own style, then 2, assess the communication style of others, then 3, most people will accept that there's actually a better chance to modify our own behaviours if we wish to. Here's the truth. We can't change the behaviours of others. That's really up to them. But we can change our own style, and in doing so, others frequently respond by changing their behaviour to meet us accordingly. By the time we're adults, we have very defined filters through which we both give and listen to others. These filters lead to value judgments, show in our choice of words, in our tone, and very much in our gestures that we use. And of course, the other party is busy evaluating you too, so through their own set of filters. This is a business webinar, so it makes sense to take a look at types of workplace conflicts. First of all, performance conflict. The assessment really is that someone is not meeting expectations, maybe shoddy work, too many missed deadlines or lack of attention to detail. The team or the other employees will have noticed, and leaders especially are expected to front up and address it. As you guessed, it's really about personal perspective. It plays quite a big part here. It's from whose perspective the shoddy work is being done. For those that of you that follow me in my other webinars or have been involved with training with me, you'll actually know how much of an advocate I am for pointing out a particular slide that's very relevant here on how we initiate, or our attitude towards activity. Some are just like the I do it types, just get in there and just need movement and just go forth and hurry up and perform activity. And others are, look, let's wait and think about how to do it first and properly and accurately. There's no right or wrong, but fast action versus thoughtful actions can be one area at play here and can lead to what looks like performance issues. So the second area is relationship conflict. Differences in personality styles and perspectives can make it difficult for team members or staff to get along and communicate well. Disputes can take any form, but the underlying difference in attitude, what motivates us, what demotivates us, what's out of our comfort zone, what we like to avoid, personalities, and even our abilities are at the root of most relationship-based conflict in the workplace. So left to fester, the conflict usually grows until it affects the wider team and quite often a whole company culture. Often conflict, or what we perceive as a difficult person from our perspective, is not an easy situation to deal with. So more often than not, we tend to avoid it until it's at crisis point. So what can we do about solving these particular areas? By using DISC methodology for conflict and handling difficult people, we can gain an understanding of our own different behavioral similarities and differences and try to identify the styles of our own clients or customers or team or staff or leader or boss or even family. It can help us spot signs of trouble early on and give us the right approach for dealing with conflict individually or in groups. Even more than that, it can give us the ability at times to step back and find the tolerances for that person and maybe not take issues so personally if we know it's part of their makeup to do things a certain way or react a certain way. The direct, detailed approach that works so well with the D or C type will often flat out fail with one of the other types, even if you're dealing with the same type of conflict situation. And that's really important to remember. This type of thing can add to the complexity of dealing with someone that you deem difficult as well. So, in contrast, if you take more people-oriented talk triggers, one of the things to understand conflict is actually understanding what's underneath it. So we want to look briefly at types of workplace conflict with what we've just done with the previous slide, and that can be mainly broken down into those two categories of performance and relationship-based issues. But part of understanding both of those are actually the layers underneath as the result that results in the conflict in the first place. The more you can understand about people's makeup or behavioral type, the more you can understand what might trigger people in the first place. So the DISC model can provide those insights, and a lot of this including things like ideal preferences, avoidance areas, and overuse areas, which are often our blind spots. So let's have a look at those slides and those areas now, because it's really good to learn them, to make them part of your conflict resolution. So I find this slide particularly good, just to remind myself as well that this is part of people's triggers. So the ideal environment of a particular type of person is pretty important. Putting someone in a situation that works against them is bound to result in tension in a difficult situation. When you know that an individual is logical, they need routine and prefer to work alone, you know not to challenge them with an overcrowded workplace that could actually feel to them like chaos and sensory overload. Those outgoing optimists on your team, on the other hand, they will wilt if you isolate them and give them too many detailed oriented tasks and surround them with rules and routine. Mismatching staff or team members or employees' DISC styles with their workplace environment and setup can cause plenty of conflict. And as the individual will already feel out of their element and on edge, this will amplify everything they're feeling. This goes for clients as well. Sometimes it's really good to consider where you meet them, especially if you know you're about to handle a situation that could be a bit tricky or volatile. So let's take a quick look at the ideal environment is a slide that you can also get hold of on the VIP pages, but it really is important to understand the I's, S's, etc., what they find or what they deem as an ideal environment or workplace for them to be in. Doesn't have to be workplace, but surroundings. You can see down there with the S, clearly defined role, predictable routines, little or no change, so risk-free. The D, challenging, independent. The I, obviously, working with people, positive and fun atmosphere. So, and the C, opportunity to upskill, free from aggression, free from abstract emotion. So some of these are really key to why they could have conflict or why they feel put out in the first place. So let's have a look at another slide, which I feel is pretty important to add to the underlying effects of conflict or difficult people. And it's one that I've talked about before. It's called with fears. So as I've said before, I've chosen sort of 3 slides to examine a little bit closer, but obviously there's a lot more under a conflict situation in these particular 3 slides, but they are important to know. So this slide of fear deals with issues of pain versus gain. Just about all of us, all the time, are either avoiding pain or pursuing gain. We have concerns and we have fears. So it's no surprise the stronger of the 2 drivers is almost always avoiding pain over pursuing the gain. The DISC tool can highlight these concerns and fears once you know what to look for. So, for example, a business person who has a strong D, a dominance and drive, is very likely to be really concerned about being taken advantage of, appearing weak and not achieving their goals and standards, and certainly they like being in control. So, no surprise, their natural tendency will be to avoid the pain of these and often feel annoyed when they sense these emotions being triggered. Yes, that is why they often come out fighting or come out very strong. They want to take control back and squash where the situation might be heading. Standing on the other side of that can feel a bit like being hit by a bulldozer. Your feelings often aren't considered, nor are your opinions if they aren't bottom line facts. It becomes who can push their way through a situation with facts, speed, and tone. And yes, the D is pretty natural at doing this as you are scratching their pain areas, therefore they need to overpower. So let's have a look at the I. You know, an I type person can fear rejection, not being heard, being disliked, or being insignificant. It's for this reason many I-type salespeople often need special coaching to close a difficult sale where the friendship and relationship they built with the client has been tested. The sales tension is not something they enjoy typically. Once again, an I-type driver will quickly switch on to avoid these emotions. It can look like a very personal and emotional outburst to others standing on the other side. I-styles are often quick to cut the person down and uncover personal weak spots, which can be very painful. The other area to bear in mind is that they think as they talk aloud. Often something will be said in the heat of the moment that they should have been thinking, but too late, it's out, and often they feel regret afterwards. So moving on to the S here, the S-type people frequently fear letting people down, unknown rapid changes, finding themselves in aggressive situations and having to speak up and give their opinions in tough meetings. Another area is unplanned or undefined deadlines, which creates enormous pressure and stress on them, not to let others down, of course. Interestingly enough, our easygoing S-type facing their fear is suddenly not so easygoing. In fact, they can become incredibly stubborn and very opinionated about certain things, especially if they haven't been felt that they haven't been listened to or not been treated fairly. Think about a time you may have heard an S-type person deal with a customer service operator who didn't stop, listen, and let them talk. I can tell you it's not pretty. They can actually get quite assertive in this situation, even if they are a bit anxious about the whole tension. Just remember, they might forgive, but they don't tend to forget. So lastly, with the fears, I wanted to have a look at the C-type people, and typically they react if they feel that they could be blamed for being wrong or making a mistake. This is a really big driver in the fears, and hey, it will really show in their avoidance tactics here and by their reactions. Another area is loss of control, especially if it's about information flow and having to make decisions under pressure without enough information. They could make a wrong decision, of course, and we know that that's a biggie for C-type people. Also, if rules and regulations aren't being followed and situations become ambiguous, for them then they can often become extremely critical and nitpicky and unhelpful before totally withdrawing and to avoid the pain. So being on the opposite side of the sea, facing their fears can often be frustrating when they don't move on, but they're still bogged in the detail of proving themselves to be blame-free, or they have shut down and removed themselves from the situation. So you can't actually get to them to talk to them and talk it out. You know, a thorough understanding of our own fears and concerns and having a better understanding of others' avoidance issues, we already put ourselves in a better place to handle conflict in a more intelligent, less emotional, and less reactive way. This is emotional intelligence based on cognitive understanding rather than emotional frustration built on reaction. So just as avoiding pain is important, we are all just as strongly motivated by those behaviours which help us gain what we want. Oh, sorry, I've gone over too many. Beg your pardon. The DISC process is equally helpful here too. And whether you think styles are nature or nurture, each of our styles quickly learns what generates best gains and avoids most of our pain. However, there are times where we use these strengths in context. We think we're going to gain something from them, when in actually we are overusing them so much they're causing a hindrance to those around us. Too much of one thing becomes too strong and frustrating to others, even more so if it's a weak point in that person's style as well. It's frequently true that these overuse areas are often fuel to the fire in conflict situations, as they are areas we often rely on to get us through the tension we're in. It's like adding petrol to a burning fire already. So, yes, of course, the D style perfects the ability to be decisive and tough, behave with a strong will, remain competitive, and come across as independent and confident. However, as pressure and tension grows, the D style can move into what can only be described as overuse. And what we start to see is things like on the slide there, aggression, demanding, self-centered, overbearing, and can step outside their authority. I know I've created in-depth webinars previously on overuse behavior of the styles, so I won't go into all the details, all the styles this time. I just wanted to point out to you the relevance of how the styles' overuse areas really are part of why conflict can arise and why we think someone is really difficult to deal with. So the point of all this background information that I'm giving you is to understand in normal work relationships the behaviors of those we work with, and to understand our own self and emotional reactions based on pain and gains under tension. It's these links that help us evolve and find a willingness to change or adapt in situations that cause conflict. No amount of set conflict strategy or steps that I can teach you will be effective without some underlying knowledge about what makes me or someone else tick. It's about developing empathy with the other person, not about rules of engagement delivered from top down, though of course having strategies and methodologies will help as a secondary step as well. Just remember too, though being under pressure tends to send us back to using our reset mode, our natural behaviour, which is more comfortable. But many tactics we use in conflict situations can also be conscious or learned behaviours too. Though, in truth, it's harder for us to stick to using them if we aren't in control of ourselves and consciously thinking about how we can apply them all the time. Once we lose control and tend to revert to our natural style, and all the areas that provoke us start to come out as well, that's when our calm exterior can leave and the energy starts pouring out. So let's go back to our primary disc styles and drill down a little bit more on each one. So learning to deal with the D style. You can see on the slides there as I go. Now, these individuals are high achieving and can be direct to the point of abrupt at times. They are most likely to set and work towards their own firm goals. So when people or things are in their way, things that they want to remove it. Remember, their pain is loss of control, using too much emotion and not achieving things. So conflict can arise in dealing with people who may seem too slow and procrastinating, or that they're not pulling their weight, as it can frustrate them. If you're a salesperson stopping them from getting what they want in a deal, you are also in the way. People who waffle and don't get to the point within reason can really set them off because their purpose is not clear. The thing here is that the D style is a fast thinker and an action taker. And for those styles that often need a lot of processing time before they take action, this can lead to conflict quite quickly. Typically, the hard driving dominant D style can end up just charging in and fixing or doing the activity themselves. And other more passive or people pleasing styles can easily be intimidated or steamrolled by this type of aggressive worker. The D can react harshly to criticism also during conflict and can become aggressive in the eyes of others. So when conflict arises, communication almost always goes better if you can know your purpose with them. Conversations is more to the point, make your conversation faster with shorter sentences and altogether more meaningful, especially state the purpose of why you're not in conflict with them, but why you are dealing with what you're dealing with. They want to resolve things fast so they can have direction and move on. And here's a powerful tip when communicating with a D, especially in conflict. First, set an agenda. 2 or 3 issues like, okay, let's look at what went wrong and also how we will fix it. Signal to the other party that this conversation has a purpose. It is going somewhere. It has been thought about, or that you're in control of where it's going, or they will step in and take control as their time is precious to them. Here's another tip worth practicing. Keep your own communication in the factual or cognizance arena. This helps you to be less emotional yourself and gets on with the issue at hand. Basically, in dealing with a conflict with a D, you should keep calm, rational, and direct in your communication. So let's have a look at our I style, learning to deal with the I style in conflict. So these excitable employees or team members or customers are also likely to speak up when challenged or upset. They are more prone to outbursts and dramatics than the other styles. They are also more likely to be upset by perceived personal slights or feelings that another employee is getting undeserved accolades. In a nutshell, I styles need to participate and to be heard. They need to be talking and to be influencing people. Even if they're trying to listen, if they're not engaged in the conversation, it's really hard for them to stay listening. So the tip with conflict is both encourage them to talk by asking questions, but learn the skill of agenda control to keep the conversation on track. Keep bringing them back to the point. You might even learn some simple techniques like the real issue is, etc. Or that's important, but more important is, etc. Or at the end of the day, what we need to resolve is, and may have a statement there. These transitions both let you engage with an I in full conversation, but at the same time keep the communication on track, which is really important. Remember, with an I, not talking things through is their pain. Being excluded is their pain. And pain quickly leads to tension, which leads to the dominating, trying for the I style to try and dominate, and therefore conflict. So let's have a look at S, learning to deal with the S type. So this worker is less likely than others to engage in direct conflict with others, so it's why this style can also surprise us. Normally quiet and often in the background, S types, like all of us, have deep-seated avoidance pain areas too. It's this that they usually hold in and hold below the surface. But occasionally, if a major area like fairness or injustice is triggered, then suddenly that quiet S person either explodes to everyone's surprise or totally withdraws and becomes sullen and almost self-excluded or often passive-aggressive. They can be resistant to change, so even minor changes in procedure or routine can be surprisingly upsetting to this otherwise pretty steady employee. So if you want to avoid conflict and hurt feelings in this area, plenty of notice of pending changes, from anything from workflow to change around of the offices, for example, and new desks are going to be allocated. This will help otherwise for them to cope. But almost always, the S-type people give very big clues and cues to what they are thinking. Not so much in the content, but in their tone, their manner, and their style. The tip is to recognize these clues. Don't ignore them, but question why the S person feels that way. Take your time and don't talk over them. Let them express their thoughts for a change, and don't interrupt. If you're a D or an I type person, you will want to push the issue along and control it. Our experience is you will avoid much conflict by holding back, going slower, and letting the S-type person express themselves fully. It will be quicker for you in the long run and far more productive. So lastly, dealing with the C-type person. This work-focused person can become overly critical when challenged or someone is not doing what they're supposed to do. Remember, the C style is logical, exact, correct. They're a real thinker. These people can resist change if it doesn't really mean improving quality of work. They are concerned about processes and rules and what should be. Their pain is often flamboyant or overly emotional expressions, as they all think that that is like puff and wind without any substance as well. So here's our tip. Use evidence. Evidence can be logical, and yes, it can be visual aids. It might be facts, statistics, or research. But C-type people usually respond well to anecdotes and stories with real examples. So if you're dealing in a business with a C-type person, you will almost always do better to avoid conflict by less bluster and emotion, more facts and anecdotes, and evidence to back up your communication or your issue. Also, like D's, they want you to get straight to the point and explain the why. The why is often very important. The C style worker will often want proof or evidence to back up your issue or problem and will resist intangible complaints or become reclusive if you can't let them know the why. Yes, there are times that this style can come across cold or even harsh to other workers and may be accused of even being a bit rude. Giving them a chance to air any issues and then ensuring others involved in the conflict are given a chance to weigh in as well can really help resolve problems in the workplace when a C person is involved. So, like a lot of things we've discussed today, it's been about underlying behaviours that help shape the way we observably behave. I also want to bring into the foreground the more common recognised types of difficult people that we might use to categorise and what we might use to categorise them. You would have met with some of these, I'm sure, yourself before, because I know I definitely have, especially in my sales arena. Again, just remember that any of the dystyles can be any of these particular difficult people. It's really about the situation and what's been needed and what their motivators are that makes them one of these. So don't think that one is particularly one way, but obviously as we work through it, you'll find that they do tend to have trends. So let's have a look, the know-it-alls. Think about it. They avoid pain by becoming adamant. They know best. Asking them questions can inflame their conflict because they feel challenged. Our tip, use words like, help me understand why you believe such and such, for example. Tell me why you think it's this way. It's a softer way of asking a question and doesn't imply disagreement. So that's often something I use, the word tell me, and it gets people to open up and explain in a softer way and not provoke them. Then there are the passives. Our tip, get what they're thinking out onto the table. Be direct, be consistent, use repetition. But the key is gently ask them what they're thinking so it's in the open. Make them feel safe with how they're thinking so they will keep being honest with you. The dictators, their pain is being questioned and not moving forward. Use and set a short agenda that we've already discussed before. So the yes people, their pain is conflict and being challenged, of course, so avoiding. So it's usually safe to do the opposite. Ask them to come up with an alternative the two of you could discuss, but give them time to think. Sometimes, especially if they are S styles, they hate being highlighted and singled out, especially in a group. So give them time to prepare their thoughts. The no people. We have to be careful not to assume that these are always S's or C type people who normally dislike change. They like to follow well-defined procedures, etc. But no people's first reaction is to resist, and that can actually be any style. Our tip, ask them how they would like to proceed. What do you see as the danger areas? Ask them for their ideas, their input. The skill is to get them talking, then decide if their reticence is based on facts or fear. Then lastly, the gripers. It's not always the case, but usually gripers gripe behind the scene. They are simply expressing their fears, but not often in a main meeting. They are looking for support from others. And actually, the I styles can be quite good at sub-teaming in this way, influencing people into their way of thinking. So our tip, confirming their own thinking. Don't allow yourself to be drawn in. A team's only a team if they agree to move in the same direction. Gripers usually stop griping if they don't get support from others. So understandably, we've gone through a fair bit of information today, and I wanted to just do a quick summary of some of the information that we did cover. So one of the things that we've talked about today is, we all tend to behave in routine. Some of our behaviours are just natural and some are perceived need to adjust or learned. As tension grows, we learn to defend our emotions, and this leads to conflict. The other thing is conflict can be rational or emotional, built on both. Knowing the DISC styles definitely helps you understand why people behave the way that they do. Each style has common gain behaviors, and each style definitely has pain behaviors. And sometimes we can refer to those as overuse behaviors, for example, or fears. So that's why I wanted to show you those 3 slides. That really helps to understand what gain and pain can be of the styles. So conflict can be reduced or avoided if we learn some fairly basic behavioral tips, and I gave you a few of those just throughout the webinar as well. So when interpersonal conflict affects us in the workplace, it can quickly alter our levels of motivation, job satisfaction, and job performance. And all of these can affect the business performance and the bottom line. So we need to learn how to deal with conflict through some of these areas and putting them into practice. Conflict can be avoided, but conflict can't be avoided, but it certainly can run smoother if you understand people better and try practicing some of the tips that you learned for each of the styles. So that takes me to the end of the webinar today. It was quite content full, I know, but as I said, the webinar will be up on the VIP pages shortly. But if you have any questions about the webinar today or would like some more information, just shoot through an email to HR Profiling and let them know if you are interested in getting the webinar, of course, or any of the individual slides. That slide I was talking to you about with the bit more information on it about the behaviours and overuse are also individually up on the VIP system as well. So let me know if there's any information you would like. Other than that, I will see you next month for our next webinar. Thanks everyone for listening. Much appreciated. Bye.